Well, investigators will no doubt pay close attention to those first-person accounts. They have interviewed everybody or are in the process of interviewing everybody from the plane. Let's get reaction from our next two guests. Clark Kent Irvin is a former Inspector General for Homeland Security. Also with us, terror expert Glenn Schoon. Mr. Irvin, let's start with you. Your evaluation of this situation, as you've heard it, we're getting more and more details over the last few hours. We now seem to have a relatively good picture of what happened. We're lacking a good picture of who this suspect is and why he did it.
Right. Well, Ali, this just serves to underscore that aviation, for some reason, continues to be a real focus for terrorists in general and al-Qaeda in particular. It's still unclear exactly whether this particular Nigerian had ties to al-Qaeda, but clearly he had terrorist intent. And the reason for our focus on aviation is clear. It's a mass transportation mode, obviously. It involves lots of people. Two, it's visually impactful, needless to say. And three, we in the United States have, of course, spent the bulk of our resources and attention since 9/11 on shoring up the aviation sector since 9/11, since that's the means by which we were attacked on 9/11. And if there were a successful terror attack on aviation post 9/11, God forbid, it would show that we remain weak even at our strongest point.
Well, what does this tell you? What does today's incident tell you? Does that tell you there was an attack or it was a failed attack because we've managed to handle these things? Because it sounds to me like somebody got something on a plane that at least effectively allowed them to set fire to something.
Right. Well, this raises a number of troubling questions. One is, we've heard conflicting things about whether this guy was on a terror watch list. We've heard that he was known to have some terrorism ties, but was not on a watch list. We've also heard that he may have been on a watch list. We need to nail that down, obviously.
Right.
If he was on a watch list, then obviously he should not have been allowed to fly on any plane, and certainly not a plane bound for the United States. You may recall, Ali, that a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, right around Christmas time, the holiday season, there were a number, I want to say about a dozen flights that were headed for the United States and were then diverted in mid-flight from the United States back to their points of origin in Europe when it was learned by DHS officials that somebody on the plane manifest had a name that was apparently connected to terrorism. What I don't understand in this case is if, in fact, whether he was on a list or not, if somebody knew, apparently, that this fellow had known terrorism ties, then why was he allowed to stay on a plane that was bound for the United States? The second issue, which we've been discussing, obviously, for a number of hours, is exactly how this incendiary device made its way past airport screeners. We don't know whether he had it with him when he boarded the flight in Nigeria. If he did, then that's somewhat understandable, since, as a number of people have pointed out, Nigeria is notorious for having lax aviation security. In any event, he ought to have been, along with every other passenger, re-screened once he boarded the flight in Amsterdam, especially since that flight was bound for the United States. If that should have happened. If it did happen, why wasn't the device discovered then? If it wasn't discovered, it certainly should have been. It also points up, by the way, that there are a number of things that can be detected. We're not very good at detecting explosives and liquids, as a number of people have said. And this just points to continued vulnerabilities in our detection technology. Just last week, or about a week ago or so, there was this big snafu about TSA releasing its screening protocols. Now, this is not a result of that, obviously, but it just underscores that it's easier than it ought to be to get guns and knives and certainly explosives, which appears to be terrorist weapons of choice, past screeners, not just in the United States, but all over the world.
Glenn Schoon, it does sort of bring this into two areas. We've got one is a policy issue, whether or not we were able to track somebody who's connected to a terror network, or whether or not this was somebody largely operating on their own with limited capability. And then the second issue, which is a technological issue. What did he have, and how did he get it on the plane?
That's right, and it's going to take some close looking at the situation, particularly in Amsterdam, obviously. One question, too, is separately, if he did get the device in Yemen, how did it get from Yemen to Amsterdam to get aboard the flight? Did it travel through or with him from Nigeria or not? Now, Amsterdam is one of the largest airports in Europe. It's on a scale of, say, Heathrow or Frankfurt in Germany, around 40 to 50,000 people a day. Security there is headed by military police. They have a platform in which different operators, including private security, cooperate. And U.S. flights definitely get more additional security coverage than others. But clearly this is going to be a focal point. I just spoke to some people in Amsterdam 2 hours ago, and there's a major operation underway there to support Homeland Security and the FBI in its endeavor to figure out what's going on.
Clark, let's talk a little about next steps. We spoke to Mike Brooks, who said FBI is involved in this. They're probably taking this incendiary device or whatever, liquids or powders, whatever it ends up being, to Quantico and trying to get a handle immediately on what it is. Until we have a handle on what it is, are we likely to see increases in airport security?
We absolutely are. As Gene Meserve and others have been reporting, we are definitely likely to see that. You know, the terror alert level, the color code, has been high at orange for a number of years now, so that's not going to change. But as she and others have noted, there are likely to be some increased measures within that color level. For example, we'll surely see increased armed police presence at airports around the country. Certainly in the significant cities, we'll see bomb-sniffing dogs. We'll probably see an increase of behavior detection officers who tend to be plainclothes transportation screener officers who are trained to look at behavior, at things that might indicate anxiety, deception, terrorist intent. A number of things are going to be going on at airports in these next few days, and that's important. There really are two things going on. One, we've got to focus on the investigation. How did this happen? How can it be prevented? And in the meantime, we've got to step up aviation security around the